Hello, Jets fans, and welcome to another episode of Rich Sports Talk, your home for all the latest and greatest on the New York Jets. And we were going to dive right in to the big storylines heading into the first preseason game, but some big news out of Florham Park. Apparently, the Jets are getting healthier. Mike Williams was taken off the PUP list just moments ago, which means he is eligible to practice, which is huge news for his ACL. This has been kind of an underlying story throughout the preseason as we've been waiting for Mike Williams to get back. Now, I doubt Mike Williams will get into any games, but the fact that he's practicing is good in line that he can be ready to go week one. Now, I do think it's going to be Mike Williams' usage is going to be very limited the first week or two just till he gets comfortable. Very similar like to Breece Hall, how the Jets eased him into the schedule last year. I know a lot of Jet fans are not happy, especially with how he was breaking off those big runs early in the season. But I do think that this is a great sign that the Jets, who are paying Mike Williams to, let's be honest, be their number 2 wide receiver and their big outside threat, is now healthy, activated off the PUP list. So that is some huge news for the Jets as we head into the first preseason game of the offseason. Now, there is a lot of headlines to talk about, and oddly, for the first time in probably my lifetime and most of your lifetimes, it feels like we're not talking about the quarterbacks in the preseason. Last year, the big storyline was trying to see if Zach Wilson was progressing. Is he getting better under the tutelage of Aaron Rodgers? Are we seeing progression? Are we seeing him reading defenses better? And it seemed oddly like he actually did have a pretty good preseason last year until it all went downhill. So this year, unfortunately, I think if Jordan Travis was healthy, it might add a little bit of intrigue for this process. But unfortunately, with him being injured, we are not going to see him in this preseason. But there are still some pretty big headlines going into this first preseason game that I wanted to talk about and that I felt were very important to keep an eye on. Now, the preseason isn't what it used to be, especially now with the reduced games, with teams basically seemingly sitting, if they have a roster of 53, chances are 30 to 35 of those guys you'll never see take the field. I doubt we're going to see certain ones take the field this year, but I do think that there are some interesting things to keep an eye out for, and especially if you're going to the game like I am on Saturday, I do think there's a couple of key things to look out for. Now, the first thing that I really thought about, and I think it's very related to the Williams with Mike Williams, is going to be Jason Brownlee. Now, Brownlee has been a big story of camp. He was a big discussion last year, had a nice preseason, offers the Jets another big wide receiver. But now with Mike Williams coming off the PUP list, this is going to create some competition for Brownlee, and I really want to see how he's utilized. Now, again, there are a lot of Jets receivers right now on the bubble, but you feel pretty confident that the Jets, the biggest question is how many receivers they will carry into this season, because you pretty much know 5 are making the team. You know, Garrett, Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, Alan Lazard, and Xavier Gipson. Now, Gipson is a slot receiver, big return man for this team. Even though he's injured right now, you pretty much know he's going to make the team. So then it comes down to, well, does Irv Charles have a role potentially because of his contributions on special teams? Malik Taylor, Tyler Harrell, Hamzy El-Zayed. I mean, there's a couple of guys on the bubble, but to me, Jason Brownlee is the most intriguing one because there's been a lot of talk about him performing at camp this year, and I do want to see how he performs. Now, it might be a little bit tricky because the Jets, I don't think Rodgers is going to play until maybe the 3rd preseason game at all. I'm curious to see how much Tyrod Taylor plays because with the Jets, the biggest thing is you want Tyrod Taylor healthy. Maybe he gets a couple series, but it feels like for the majority of these games, you're going to be seeing basically quarterbacks that aren't going to be on this roster, at best going to be on the practice squad. So you're kind of curious how that's going to impact evaluating these wide receivers. Are they going to be able to get the ball? Are they going to be able to make plays? But Brownlee is someone I'm keeping an eye on. Also, speaking of the offense, I think another interesting guy to keep an eye on is Izzy Abanikanda. Now, Izzy last year during this time was showing some flashes. I remember I was at the preseason game where he got dinged up. And it was funny at the time because a lot of opinions. And I was talking to a couple of my friends when we were at the game and how he was taken off the field and how bad it looked. And like I remember talking to people, I'm like, I think he's done for the season. The way he went down, the way he was hurt, I think Izzy's done. I really think he's done for the season. And that was a bummer because I think there's a little bit of excitement around Izzy because of how well we saw the college tape, the explosiveness. And at the time, don't forget, you didn't have Brees Hall really fully back. So there was almost an expectation that you were going to need Izzy to contribute. And for whatever reason, it seems that Izzy has fallen out of favor with this coaching staff. And it almost seemed like a foregone conclusion that Izzy wasn't even going to make this team until basically Tariq Cohen a week ago just decided to retire out of nowhere, which was a little surprising. Again, I don't know the full story why he retired. Again, I will never get on a guy for retiring in the NFL. If they just feel it's time to go, if they feel like they want to spend more time with their family, I absolutely have no issue with that. And I wish him the best in retirement. But now all of a sudden, Izzy, this seems like his last chance with the Jets because they've already invested in 2 running backs in the draft, Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen's already getting nicknames as the Killer Bees from Brees Hall. So for Izzy, the biggest thing I think is going to really be an important watch is not just him as a running back, but seeing if he contributes in the kicking game. With the new kickoff rules, we've seen that the return game has drastically changed. Now, I do think Gibson is likely going to be the main return man for the Jets. Maybe Malachi Corley gets in there a little bit as well. But I just get this feeling that if Izzy's going to find a place on this team, he's going to have to contribute because at best, he's probably going to be the 4th running back. And if a team's going to carry 4 running backs, he's got to show something. And I really think it's going to be on special teams. So I'm going to make a note of watching if he plays as a returner, what he does as a returner. Do they try him out as a gunner? Because if he's not on the special teams, it almost feels like the writing's on the wall, but who knows? We've seen guys that have seemingly been dead in training camp come out and play exceptionally well in the preseason. If he has a big game, maybe that gets him back in favor with some of the coaching staff, but Izzy is definitely someone that I would keep an eye on. But I'd also love to hear from you guys in the chat. Make sure to hit that like button, give us a subscribe, and also check us out later on. But again, guys, if you're just tuning into the show now, make sure to put those comments in there into the channel so I can answer your questions. And again, thank you for all the support. Another interesting thing I would keep an eye on is the offense. Now, again, this is very offensive heavy because, again, the offense has been the biggest question for the Jets for most of our lives. But one thing, again, it's not necessarily the biggest headline, but I am curious to see this offensive line. Now, I think Olu's probably going to get a good amount of reps at left tackle. We know Tyron Smith's not going to play in the preseason. So I think Olu's going to get a lot of reps at left tackle, which will be fun to watch. I'm curious to see how certain guys line up. Now, Max Mitchell has been playing a lot of right tackle with Carter Warren being banged up. Now, will he start at right tackle? Will they kick him inside to guard? Will they give him reps on the inside? That's something I'm going to keep an eye on because I'm really curious to see also, like, who's the backup center for this team? Is it going to be Schweitzer? Is Schweitzer going to come in to take the snaps at center? Is it going to be Newman? Is it going to be Hansen? There's a lot of moving parts on this offense that I'm curious to see and see how they really fit into play. And another thing is going to be the 3rd tight end. I think the Jets know who their number 1 and 2 tight ends are, but who's the 3rd one? Kenny Yeboah. He's been hanging around with this team, athletic tight end. Does he finally get that 3rd role, or is it going to be Ferkser? Now, Ferkser came in. The reason I would be a little bit curious again on Anthony Ferkser is don't forget he has experience with Todd Downing, the Jets passing game coordinator previously. More of a veteran player, again, a little bit older, but you wonder, could he be maybe more of that 3rd role tight end where he maybe understands the playbook a little bit better, maybe can block a little better than Yeboah. But Yeboah does have a really good established role on the special teams. So that is going to be very interesting because I doubt the Jets carry 4 tight ends unless they decide to maybe carry 3 running backs and use one of them as a hybrid fullback. That's maybe the biggest thing I could see. But another interesting thing I'm going to keep an eye on in this preseason is definitely going to be the defensive line. I do think that you're going to see Eric Watts and Leonard Taylor. I mean, Eric Watts has been one of my favorite guys. I've been banging the drum for him since the Senior Bowl. I think he's going to make this team because he's really shown out in practice. I think with his size and 6'5", 277, being able to play inside and outside is going to be incredibly important. Now, the biggest thing too is I think this defensive line, there's a lot of talent on this defensive line. It's trying to figure out who's going to stick, because I think Watts is someone, the flexibility is why he's going to stay. Leonard Taylor, who is another really high undrafted free agent, hasn't really flashed as much as Watts, but has still been pretty good in camp. Did they decide to carry him? I mean, Leonard Taylor, the third, did they decide to keep him out? Keep him in this rotation, keep him on this defensive line. And for the defensive end position, I mean, Tack McKinley has been flashing in camp again, mostly against the third team, but maybe does he get a couple good reps in the game and go against some of these teams' first or second offensive linemen? And if he can impress, I mean, Braden McGregor has also had some flashes. Jalen Holmes has that versatility. I think the big one that we're really looking for, though, is going to be Will McDonald, because, again, a lot of headlines around McDonald, especially when the depth chart came out and he was second on the depth chart behind Michael Clements at defensive end. My personal opinion on that decision, I think that depth chart's a little bit more first down. I don't think you're going to see McDonald on the field a lot in running situations where you'll see Clemens slide in there. And the big thing with him is I get this feeling that McDonald's going to be used a lot like Bryce Huff was early in his career, like 45% of the snaps coming in strictly passing situations and just have him wreak havoc. Now, again, I think he can be a very big contributor on this team, but I already can get the sense that there's a lot of fans that are frustrated with that draft pick, because if you're going to spend a top 15 pick on a defensive player, you want them to be on the field a lot more and making an impact on multiple assets of the game. And look, I know Jet fans are a little bit frustrated. I know the coaching staff said that they want him up to 250. He's 235, 240. I mean, look, he's a speed edge guy. He comes off the edge. His big thing is speed. The big thing with him, though, is can he, when he's on the field, be effective? And I'm curious to see how much he plays in the preseason, because, again, the one thing with McDonald is you see flashes. We saw it in the regular season last year. You see that he's got an incredible first step, that he's got explosiveness coming off the edge. The question is, can he be extremely consistent? Can he prove that these extra reps that he's getting, that Hassan Reddick, because Hassan Reddick isn't there, that these reps he's going to make a difference out of? And look, I get that there's going to be a lot of people watching it, but with Will McDonald, I think there's a big target on his back with Jet fans, unfortunately, at this point, because when you're a first-round pick, there's certain expectations. And again, I think being the 15th pick in that draft was a tough one. I think the Jets, unfortunately, were in a place in that draft, which when we look back on, I don't think we're going to look at that draft and go, there's a ton of great first-round talent. It really was like the first 10, 11 picks, there's a lot of great talent, and then there was a steep drop-off. And unfortunately for the Jets, it dropped off right before they were picking. I think they got cute with the offensive line. It came back to bite them. In a perfect world, I would have taken Will McDonald later in the draft, but he's someone they love. He's someone that, again, I keep going back to this, where people are like, well, the Jets should have traded out of that pick. The Jets should trade out. I think the Jets wanted to. The Jets took that clock down in that draft to a minute. I really believe if the Jets got a decent enough offer, they would have taken it, but they didn't want to get swindled. They didn't want to drop back for nothing. They didn't want to drop back and just get a bad compensation pick later. And I think they just made the decision, look, we're just going to take the best player on our board right now. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch with McDonald, to definitely keep an eye on this preseason. I'm going to watch too, where they line him up. How often is he playing? Can he win a little bit with a bull rush? Now, there was times in practice, you've seen some flashes against Morgan Moses. The one thing you're hoping for, especially this year with this young defensive line, maybe they'll get even better because they're actually going against legitimate offensive linemen. They're going against Tyron Smith. They're going against Olufashanu, who's a top 11 pick. They're going against Morgan Moses. AVT is healthy. I mean, they're going against legitimate offensive linemen, where last year it was, okay, it's Mekhi Becton, it's this guy's hurt, okay, it's this backup. So I do think that this is going to be a very interesting training camp for McDonald. But I'm also curious to see, does Tack McKinley flash? Does Eric Watts flash? Does Leonard Taylor the third flash? Like, there's certain guys on this defense that I'm really curious to see how they look out there. The cornerback room, I think a lot of us are excited to see Quantez Stiggers. I think he's going to be a very good player for this team, has had an unbelievable camp so far. Bernard Converse has also been another guy that's had a really good camp as well. The safety position's interesting too. Tony Adams, I'm not sure how many reps he's going to get, especially coming off his injury. We know that Ashton Davis got a little bit banged up in practice, so he's likely not going to be out there. And I meant Chuck Clark, not Tony Adams. So I think you're going to see a lot of Isaiah Oliver and Jalen Key out there. Key, of course, Mr. Irrelevant in the draft. The key to key, actually, I do think is going to be how well he can play in the passing game. Can he play closer to the line in running situations? But also, I'm curious to see how he makes an impact on special teams. Seeing some of you guys in the live stream, any questions or comments, please let me know. If you're joining us after this video, of course, you can always put your comments in the video below, and I will answer them in the next one. And if you have ideas for future videos, if you want me to make Jets lists like I've been doing, I can definitely do that. If you like Jets top 10 lists, like top 10 best, top 10 worst, top 10 memorable, I would definitely love to do so. But the chat is open. Would love to hear what some of your headlines are for the preseason, some of your thoughts coming into this game. So again, guys, the chat is open. If you would like to reach out, would love to hear what you're feeling, what your thoughts about Jets training camp are so far. Are there standouts that you're looking for? Is there certain players that you've had your eye on that you're really wanting to see in this first preseason game? So please let me know who you're going to be, and let me know if you're going to be at the game. I will be at the game this weekend. Really excited to see you guys all there. So if you guys are there at the preseason game and you see me, don't be afraid to say hi, but I will definitely be there. So again, please let me know if there is anything you want to talk about right now. Would love to hear about this, although a little bit of news, not super Jets related, but Zach Wilson on falling out of the rotation of first team rep. I've got no control over that. It's the worst thing you can do is let that affect you. I'm just trying to get better in stack days. So it seems like Bo Nix is beating out Zach Wilson in Denver. So that should definitely be a headline to keep an eye on. And as much as people are worried about Zach Wilson coming back, I do think that is definitely a headline to keep an eye on as well. But it is a little bit funny, though, because this is really the first in a long time when I can remember where we're not really looking at quarterbacks and even backup quarterbacks for the Jets. Like, and that kind of takes a little of the buzz out of this preseason because, like, maybe there are some headlines with, like, Mike White, Straveler, some really interesting guys, but it's just like, the Jets 1 and 2 are set really for the first time in a long time at the quarterback position. And even like the intrigue of the third quarterback isn't there because Jordan Travis is injured. So that's a bit frustrating. But again, the good news is Mike Williams off the PUP list, able to practice. That's great news for this Jet team as they head into this first preseason game. I doubt Williams is going to play this preseason. But those were also some of my big headlines going into this first preseason game. Would love to hear about yours. And of course, I will give you my thoughts after the first preseason game. Who stood out, some of the headlines coming out of that game. But again, mine were Izzy Abanikanda. What's his role? Keep an eye. Does he go out on special teams? Is he a kick returner, a punt returner? I think that's how he's going to have to make this team. Jason Brownlee, now with Mike Williams coming off the PUP list, that's another spot that's going to be taken on the wide receiver depth chart. Can he really flash? And also, can the receivers flash with likely not great quarterback play? The offensive line, I'm curious to see who's going to be lining up. Will Max Mitchell get to play multiple positions, or will they just stick him at right tackle? Seeing where Olufushano, how much does he play? Does Schweitzer the number one backup center? Or does he primarily play guard? Then you look at the tight end, Yabo versus Ferkser, who comes out as the third tight end. And really, the defensive line, you have a couple big names, Tack McKinley, Eric Watts, Leonard Taylor III, a lot of guys fighting to get onto this talented group. And again, it's a good thing to have when you have this many talented defensive linemen. And I know the storyline that I haven't mentioned is, of course, Hassan Reddick. Let me give you my 2 cents on that. I do think if you were to ask me when this ends, I get the feeling that there's going to be some resolution between after this first game and between the second, because I think the Jets want him in camp for at least a little bit so he is ready to go week one. I think that it'll come to a point where Reddick's going to be losing so much money. And if I had to bet on it, I believe it comes down to a 1-year restructuring deal or maybe a 2-year deal with an opt out after this season. So it behooves Reddick, like if he has a great year, to opt out of the contract. But I do think it gets done. I think he's losing way too much money. And I do think the Jets want him in camp to at least get some reps, get some familiarity with this defense. And while I don't think he will play in the preseason, just getting those reps with the first team, figuring out where they're going to be lining him up, how he fits within the scheme. But I do think that he will eventually get signed. And I know that's going to be talked about on the broadcast. So if you're not at the game and you want a good drinking game potentially, you could take a drink every time Hassan Reddick is mentioned on the broadcast. So again, guys, I'm giving you good ideas, but maybe some bad ideas. But anyways, we have plenty of great Jets ideas here on Rich Sports Talk. So again, if you're joining us in this live stream, make sure to comment below what you would like to talk about. If there's any headlines or players that have stuck out to you in this preseason so far for the Jets. But there is a lot going on around the Jets camp. I think the biggest thing right now is that, Joe Tippmann, of course, having some issues with the snapping, but I think that's a mechanical thing. He will get that down before the regular season. I think that it's good you're seeing some flashes from some of these undrafted free agents. And really, I think the biggest thing that we have to keep an eye on is definitely this offensive line. Olu Fashanu is just playing left tackle. I'm excited to see him line up at left tackle in the first few games. I think he's going to be great in the preseason. But, man, I think you're seeing a big difference in the offensive line play with this team, and it's going to be a huge impact on the season. But we'll be back later this week to give you more breakdowns with Jets camp, all the latest with the New York Jets, and, of course, our reactions to the first preseason game. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We will see you next time here on Rich Sports Talk. So make sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe so you don't miss all the latest and greatest on the New York Jets.